The presentation is being recorded. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bruce Armon. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to share with you in a very brief format today some information about contracts, do's and don'ts, and things that you need to be aware of. My office is based in Philadelphia. My firm has offices all along the East Coast and through the Midwest as well. As far west as Chicago and Minneapolis. I'm the chair of our firm's healthcare group. My colleague, Jay Weinberg, who was kind enough to send out the invitation for this, and I'll talk about Jay in a moment, he and I have made a number of presentations over the years, both in person and virtually, to audiences talking about our respective areas of interest. I focus in the healthcare area and have over the years helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of physicians with contract issues, partnership agreements, buy-ins, buyouts, ambulatory surgery type issues. Jay is a disability insurance expert who has his own firm, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So again, very appreciative of everybody taking the time. In the limited time we have today, I want to share as much relevant information as I can. The information that I'm going to share is relevant for your first job as well as for your fifth job, and that's relevant whether you're the employer or the employee in terms of the things that you need to think about. So we'll walk through a bunch of different areas and I'll provide some reference materials for you as well. Let me see if I can get the screen to go down. So let me, a little bit just about Jay briefly. Again, Jay is my colleague who was kind of helped to set up this presentation, does a lot of work with physicians in the disability area, helping residents and fellows as well as folks once they're out in practice. Certainly if you have the need for those types of issues, I would strongly suggest you reach out to Jay. He can help with a variety of different issues that residents and fellows are often confronted with. All of his information is here on the screen. I could use this slide for many different things. For those of you paying attention to the news today and seeing the very troubling circumstances are happening in Washington, D.C., affecting the transfer of our power, that's certainly one element of what in the world is going on. But at least for purpose of the presentation today, I wanted to focus on what in the world is going on for you all. As I assume for many of you, you're getting ready to finish your training program in the next 6 months or so, and now trying to embark on this wild, wonderful world about how do I find a job? What will the job entail? How do I go about this process? How different is it going to be me for during COVID? How am I going to adjust and find a job in a place that I may not be familiar with people that I may not have ever worked with, that I don't have good firsthand references about? How am I going to make this work? So my hope is after we go through the presentation today, we'll be able to right side the world up a little bit, at least in our small area that we can control, which is with respect to the things you all need to think about with respect to how do I find a job? What do I do once I'm offered a contract opportunity? What should the contract entail? How do I go about changing the contract to the extent I want to make changes, getting it signed and getting it started so you can get your career off onto the right foot in terms of what you're looking to do. A couple of big areas of healthcare law, and if we had more time, I'd spend a lot more time going through this, but you should know there's a variety of different areas of healthcare law that you should be thinking about. We could spend 45 minutes or an hour on each of these. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, enough to make you dangerous as you think about what these issues might be and where they apply. I would ask if everybody could mute their phone, that would be great, just so we can avoid any background noise that we might have. So a couple of big areas of healthcare law that you should focus on. First big area is regulations. If you haven't figured it out yet, you're in the most heavily regulated profession we have in the country. Federal laws, Medicare, Medicaid, HIPAA, state laws as well, they need to be cognizant of. Somewhere in your agreement, it's going to say you agree to follow all relevant federal and state laws. Generally, you don't have to worry about local laws, but just know it's a heavily regulated profession. I'm sure you all know that. The second big area of healthcare law to think about is credentialing. Two main areas of credentialing to think about. One is third-party payer credentialing. The basic takeaway for that is it's a privilege, not a right, for you to be credentialed with a third-party payer. If all of your other colleagues in the hospital that you're joining or the practice that you're joining are all credentialed with the local insurance plan, it doesn't mean they have to credential you as well. They're going to ask you a lot of different questions about your background and your history and what sort of brushes with the law that you might have had. Answer all those questions honestly. I've had clients in the past with drug problems, with alcohol problems, suspension from residency or fellowship programs, disruptive behavior, harassment, all of the sort of things you would think that can happen. I've seen most of those things happen. The insurance company doesn't want to be embarrassed by having you a part of their participating provider network. Just know it's a process and it takes time. If you remember nothing else that I share with you tonight, and I mean that sincerely, though, obviously I hope you remember a lot of the things we talk about, you're entering into a business, and as much of you, many of you probably got into the healthcare world because you wanted to be a clinician and to help people and save people. You're actually entering into a business, whether you're joining a nonprofit, a for-profit, a small private practice, a large academic medical center, it's a business. And recognizing it's a business, when you think about the credentialing avenue, if I'm your prospective employer, I'm not going to have you start working for me unless you're fully credentialed with the third-party payers, because you can't see a patient today and get reimbursed for those services. And if that's the case, I don't want to be providing you a paycheck if for something that I can't get reimbursed for your services in terms of what you're looking to do. So just know the credentialing process takes time. It's going to take you several months. If you have a clean history, no unusual backgrounds, if I'm your employer, I'm likely not going to have you start working for me until I know I can get reimbursed for the services that you're providing. The second big area of credentialing you need to think about, if the first area is third-party payer, the second area that you need to think about is hospital credentialing and surgery center credentialing. I'm sure you all know from your training programs how world-class some of your institutions are, but you also know it takes them a lot of time to do a lot of things that you would think be relatively straightforward. You're going to have to fill out an application for the hospital credentialing or the surgery center credentialing. So you have to get reviewed by a staff person, likely reviewed by a credentialing committee. Then the full hospital or the full surgery center has to approve your credentials. That takes time. They're not going to move their meetings to accommodate your schedule. You're going to have to complete your paperwork to accommodate their schedule. So same thing, your employment agreement is likely going to say, if you're joining a private practice, for instance, you can't start working for me, the employer, unless you're credentialed with hospitals A, B, and C. You have to get that done before you can start. I don't want any of you to see your start date delayed because for some reason your third-party payer credentialing is not taken care of, and or your hospital or surgery center credentialing is not taken care of. Third big area of your agreement you should think about is reimbursement. As I said a moment ago, you're a business person. I know you're a physician, you're an excellent physician, but you're also a business person. I want you to be paid fairly for the services that you're providing. You're not going to get paid enough in terms of reimbursement from the third-party payers, but that's going to be the predominant source of your income in terms of what you're getting. And I want to make sure that you understand how you're getting reimbursed, when you're getting reimbursed, why you're not getting reimbursed. I'm not expecting any of you to negotiate your contract with the third-party payer who your employer is participating with, but I do want you to understand the economics of the relationship. How much are you getting paid per work RVU? How much are you getting paid for an office visit? How much are you getting paid for a surgical procedure? If there's a quality incentive that your insurer has built into it, what are the opportunities for your employer to get the benefit of those quality dollars? And then how do we make sure those dollars can flow into your pocket as well as the clinician? Because as great as a business person or administrator I might think I am, you're the clinician, you're the one who's providing the services, and to the extent the insurer is providing additional dollars because of good quality outcomes that you agree are good quality practices of medicine, I'd like to make sure those dollars flow into your pocket as well, because that could make a significant difference with respect to the compensation you're going to arrange. So if you envision that the carrot is the reimbursement, the stick is the fraud and abuse laws. There are federal and state fraud and abuse laws that you just need to be aware of. Somebody in your career at some point is going to approach you and say, doctor, do I have a wonderful way you can make some money? There's no such thing, to borrow a political phrase from earlier last year, no such thing in the healthcare world as a quid pro quo. You can't do something in exchange for something else. You're always expected to provide great quality of care. You're always expected to give, first availability for patients and getting people squared away. But you can't do it in exchange for something else. And there's a couple of federal laws you should be aware of. One called the anti-kickback statute. Under that statute, it's illegal to offer or give or receive anything of value to encourage the referral of business. Illegal to offer or give or receive anything of value to encourage the referral of business. Very broad. Think about all of the areas that would entail in terms of your normal interactions that you might have even had today with each other, with attendings, with a hospital administrator, with a home health person, with PT, with OT, with radiology, with a lab, with a device company, a pharma company. all of those people are looking to you as the fulcrum of care, and the decisions you make with what direction a patient goes in terms of the care that's provided to that patient, that's going to impact the flow of dollars in the healthcare delivery system. So be very aware of the business arrangements that your employer is entering into and what they're suggesting you need to do in terms of who you need to talk to, who you need to send patients to, what outside vendors you need to use. Understand where the dollars flow, because unfortunately, under this first bullet on the slide for the regulations, if something does go wrong, the last thing I want to have happen is something jeopardize your license. And I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but all of you can pick up your local newspapers or see things in the medical journals where a provider got in trouble for doing something that he or she probably shouldn't have done. It likely stems from a fraud and abuse violation. So just be aware, there's no shortcuts in healthcare. You got to do the right thing all the time. You have to document all the time. You have to understand where your entrepreneurial relationships can be and can't be, and how you want to handle those things accordingly. The last big area of healthcare law you should think about, that's probably one of you, most of you think about most often in terms of what a healthcare provider or a healthcare professional like me does, is tort law. I don't do any tort law work. Our firm certainly doesn't represent patients in terms of plaintiff professional liability actions. But you need to understand your insurance. It's the easiest way to get tripped up. And imagine there's language in your contract that says employer shall provide professional liability insurance for employee. You say, great, check the box. There's nothing I need to think about. They're covering my insurance. If you haven't had a conversation with your risk manager, you should ask your risk manager to come in and speak to you and your colleagues. There's two main types of insurance. One is what's called occurrence coverage. The other is what's called claims coverage. So let's say, God forbid, I'm one of your patients today and there's a bad outcome. For whatever reason, there's a bad outcome. Misdiagnosis, delayed diagnosis, poor care or poor quality of care or poor treatment, whatever things I might allege. I'm very upset about it, or I was, in my opinion, very seriously injured by it. I want to go find my friendly plaintiff's attorney to bring an action against everybody who was involved in the coordination of my care. Let's say your last day of work for your current employer is the end of this month, the end of January. If your employer in January provided for you what's called occurrence coverage, that covers you for anything that occurred while you were working for that employer, regardless of when the lawsuit was filed. So actuarially, that's very good coverage to have, because the insurance company is making a bet for your specialty in your geographic region during the statute of limitations. What's the likelihood of you getting named in a suit? Now, if you put your business person hat on again, as the employer might be saying, I, as the employer, I'm not going anywhere. What's the cheaper alternative to the occurrence coverage that might be out there? The alternative coverage is what's called claims coverage. And in that same scenario, God forbid, bad outcome today, I want to file suit against everybody under the sun. I want to file the suit sometime in February. You're only working for this employer in January. As of January 31st, your last day of work for that employer, either you or your employer needs to go out and purchase what's called tail coverage. You've all probably heard that term. The tail coverage works to sweep back in and protect you for something that happened in the January employment, but the suit wasn't filed until after you left. Tail insurance is going to be expensive. For a surgeon, it could easily cost you mid-5 figures. For a higher, what I'll call a higher-end surgeon, an anesthesiologist or an OB or a neurosurgeon or a spine surgeon, it could easily cost you 6 figures depending upon where you're practicing. Most of us don't have that kind of money laying in our bank account. So go back to that example I talked about before. That's going to show up in some of your employment agreements. Employer shall pay for employees' professional liability insurance. So you need to figure out before you sign the contract, is it an occurrence policy? If it's an occurrence policy, what happens if they switch it to a claims policy at some point during your employment? If it's a claims policy, who pays for the tail and under what circumstances? The last thing I want to have happen is you're in what I call golden handcuffs, where you can't afford to switch from job number 1 to job number 2 because you can't afford to pay for your tail coverage. Your current employer is not paying for your tail coverage, and your prospective employer says we can't pay for that tail coverage either. Because guess what? Under that first bullet, regulations, virtually every state in the country requires you to have professional liability insurance in place. You can't roll the dice and say, my patients are going to love me, I'm never going to get sued, and I'll deal with it if it comes down the pike. You need to have liability insurance in place. So be very, very careful when you look at that tort law piece. It's just one small example of some of the issues we're going to talk about that's going to show up in your contract. I want to make sure you have flexibility to go from job to job. I want to make sure if you're doing moonlighting work, you have professional liability coverage in place for that, because your main employer is likely not going to cover those circumstances in terms of what you want to do. So these are some big picture bullets you need to think about for your contract. We're going to walk through some more examples about things you need to think about. But each of these healthcare legal subjects are very, very important in terms of understanding the business of medicine and how it works for you. couple of external factors that you should consider, particularly since we're now into the new year. And for those of you who are finishing this year, it's really important. Even if you have another year to go, I've had many clients over the years who have signed jobs with their new employer before they start their last year of training. And in those circumstances, the employer actually gives them a stipend to come to their community a year later. They might give them a couple $1,000s a month. So I want to make sure you get those opportunities you take advantage of. But how do you start doing that? If the first thing I said is imagine that you're a business person, and I want you to use that mindset as you're thinking about the job. The second thing I want you to think about is pretend you're in a dating game. And I know it sounds silly, but you're really in a dating game. And during COVID, it's even a little bit harder in terms of figuring out what that dating game is going to be. But the first step in that dating game is putting your resume together. Your resume tells a story about who you are. And when I get a stack of different emails, I need to figure out, why do I want to call Bruce to ask Bruce for a job opportunity that I have, as opposed to calling Jay? Your resume tells a story. If you're going to an academic setting or a private practice setting, your resume might look very, very different. Tell a story about yourself. If you're looking to join a private practice, it may not be of interest to me that you're a co-chief. It may not be of interest to me that you love to do research. It may not be of interest to me that you love to teach. In fact, each of those things could be a turnoff for me, because I might be saying this prospective hire, he or she might not really be interested in joining my private practice. They might be better suited to the academic environment. And similarly, if you're looking to go to the academic environment, highlight the things that will make you attractive to that department or division director in terms of why they want to have you. It's the first step in the dating game. Understand supply and demand. If you're going to a community that's heavily saturated with people in your specialty, there's going to be less opportunity for you to have likely flexibility in terms of what your employment contract may offer. However, if you're going to an underserved area or an inner city area or an area that doesn't have anybody in your specialty, demand could really help you out in that regard, and you could have much more flexibility in terms of the things you can ask for. There's an expression I regularly use with my clients, which is pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. It's okay for you to be a little bit piggish in terms of what you're looking for, but I don't want you to be a hog. I want you to understand the supply and demand in your community and what you can expect to get in terms of how it's going to work. Understand the competitive landscape. Depending upon your specialty and the geographic area that you're looking to go to, the circumstances could change very, very much. If there's a hospital in distress during COVID, there's many hospitals in distress. Understand if the hospital is going to make it to the end of this pandemic and what they're going to look like on the other side. If you're joining a private practice, understand how many other private practices are there in the community. Are the private practices looking to join together and to form a super group? Is venture capital coming into that practice? I know all of you are of different specialties, but there are certain specialties where venture capital has been very active. Anesthesiology, radiology, some multi-specialty practices. Working for venture capital may not be any better or different than working for a hospital, but the goal motivation might be different by the venture capital investor. So understand what's going on in the community that you're looking to join. To the extent any of us have a crystal ball, I'd love for you to map out where that community was 3 or 5 years ago, where they are right now, and try and put the big caveat for COVID in terms of how that's impacting the community, and where you think they might be 3 or 5 years from now, and how that's going to fit in with your long-term goals. Speaking of which, it's really important to understand what your goals and priorities are. I would suggest you delineate those goals in terms of what you're thinking about, because we need to make sure you're adequately protected. It's going to be the first time in your career where somebody's not going to say, congratulations, you've matched. We'll see you July 1st. I hope all of you get 3 or 4 or 5 different contract opportunities, and I can certainly help you make them apples to apples, if you will, so you can understand what might be the better short-term and the better long-term opportunity for you in terms of what you're looking for. But think about your goals and priorities in terms of what makes sense for you. The same goals that I might have might be priorities for you, or might be deal breakers for you in terms of how you think about things, and you really need to be selective and think about what makes the most sense. How can I make myself better in terms of what I'm looking to do? Couple of big issues you're likely going to see in your contract, and we'll talk about some of these over the next few minutes. As you think about your priorities and your deal breakers, think about how these elements fit into you. All of us want to make as much money as we can, and I have salary statistics that I'm happy to share with you. Any of you can email me after the presentation. I'm happy to share what information that I have. Don't be blinded by the dollars. I could draw up a contract for any one of you where I'm paying you $50,000 more in one job than the other, let's say, and the job that pays you $50,000 less is actually a better short-term and a long-term opportunity for you in terms of what you need to think about. The money's important, don't get me wrong, but we want to make sure it's set up in such a way that you can actually earn what you're supposed to earn, achieve the bonuses that you think you can achieve as bonuses, and you're going to get paid timely and fairly for the work that you're doing. But I get it. Money's important, and I have certainly information in my office that I can share with you about compensation. The second big area of your contract you need to think about is term and termination. I'd love to say that the first job you take after training will be your last job. The reality is it's probably not. Statistically, half of you are probably going to be looking for new jobs within the first 3 or 4 years of your first job. Hopefully by your choice, not by your employer's choice. We need to understand, how does the term and termination work? Can somebody terminate for cause? Can somebody terminate without cause? What's the timing for those sort of things in terms of how it's working? The last time you're going to have an elongated job search is really right now. Imagine that I hire you to work for me, whether it's a hospital or private practice. And imagine for some reason you're unhappy. And in the contract, it says you need to give 6 months notice. And you go to interview with somebody else and they say, yeah, I'm thinking about a new job. And the employer or prospective employer says, how soon can you start? You say, I can start July 6th. July 6th. Yeah, I have to give 180 days notice. And somebody else is going to interview at the prospective employer and they say, I can start April 6th. They have to give 90 days notice. Or somebody says, I can start May 6th. They have to give 120 days notice. The timing's important. Any employer who's looking to hire somebody is likely looking to hire somebody who's not right out of training as soon as they can get them on board. If we had done this presentation 10 years ago, for those of you who are looking in the academic environment, most people didn't switch jobs except for the beginning of the academic year, which for most places was July 1st or October 1st. People just didn't switch. Now people in academics switch all the time from one employment setting to another in terms of what they're looking to do. Understand how the term and termination works. If you can leave, if they can leave, how that timing is going to impact you in terms of what you need. The third big thing to think about, the details matter. There is no such thing as a standard employment contract. Every employer does things differently. If I was burned in the past as an employer, I'd be a fool not to change my contract prospectively in terms of making sure I'm adequately protected in terms of what I do. Every paragraph matters, every sentence matters, every word matters. If one contract says employer shall do blah, 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 and another contract says employee may do blah, 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 may is mandatory, I'm sorry, may is permissive, shall is mandatory. One word can make a big difference in terms of what the contract means. If you don't understand something, ask what it means. If they don't answer for you satisfactorily, ask again. Don't assume that something's irrelevant and it won't apply to you and it doesn't matter to you, because those are the areas where people can get themselves in trouble. Have your attorney ask the question if you're not comfortable, so you understand what it means. If a section cross-reference doesn't match up with another section cross-reference, that error doesn't necessarily work in your behavior in terms of what you may need. In terms of the goals and priorities that I alluded to before, people think about a wide variety of things. They think about things like salary, promotional opportunities, vacation time, call schedule. On the what I'll call the deal breaker side of the equation, some of it can be the converse of that. Some of it can be things that are totally different. It could be you want to do extracurricular work. You want to do moonlighting, clinical moonlighting. You want to do expert witness testimony. You're interested in developing new devices. I have many clients who in those outside activities, they could make a lot of money from doing that, even more than what they could make in their quote unquote day job. I want to make sure if you want to do those things that you're protected in that regard. And that's why it's so important to think about your goals and priorities. I mean, you know, from your own experience, if I told you that one job is Q2 and the other job is Q7, that's a huge difference in the quality of your life in terms of the things that you're looking for. Even if they're paying you for taking that extra call, it may not be the payment that they're giving to you in terms of the quality of life, in terms of what you're looking for. So we really need to specify those things in terms of what you're looking for. The last piece in that goals and priorities that's so critical are the non-compete, non-solicit, non-interference clauses. For some of you, that's the biggest priority, or it's the biggest deal breaker, depending on if you're a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person. Really, really important to understand what the non-compete is. People always ask me, geez, Bruce, are these enforceable? They are enforceable. It might be unenforceable because it's too broad or too long or too disparate. But that's a long, expensive process for you to get that parsed back when it shouldn't have been there or should have been modified in the first place. For some states that don't allow a non-compete, they have what they call liquidated damages. where the contract might say, if you violate this restriction by practicing within a certain radius and a certain time frame, you agree as liquidated damages and not as a penalty that you will pay me as the employer 12 months of your previous W-2 income. How many of our prospective employers do you think would be willing to pay that cost for 12 months of your previous salary? Or how many of us have the money in our pocketbooks or our bank accounts to pay 12 months of our salary for the privilege of working in a place that we want to go? So if you're going to a community, you think, this is the place where I want to go. This is the place where I want to meet my significant other. Or this is the place where my significant other is. This is the place we want to raise a family. This is the place where I want to have kids, whatever your circumstance might be. But the community you're going to is really important. The non-compete's going to be a really, really important issue for you in terms of what you need to worry about. If you're going to a place for that first job where you say, you know what, I don't have to stay in this community. If it doesn't work out, I don't have any ties here. I can pick up and move. If I was you, don't worry about the non-compete as much. Focus on how much money you can get. Focus on as short as termination as you need. So when you find that dream job in that ideal community you can go to, you can make a seamless transition for you. Focus on the ancillary benefits, paying for your board expenses or the moving expense or the signing bonus so you can get the quality of life factors that you need to know. Only you are going to know what's most important for you in terms of how you want to get something structured. So the non-compete could be really important. In addition to the non-compete, your employer is likely to have a non-solicit. The non-solicit is likely going to say, you're not going to solicit any of the staff because I don't want you to take away my mid-level or my office manager or one of our colleagues. Or it's going to say, or it's going to say, you're not going to solicit any of the patients, even if you were the only provider who saw any of those patients. And they have no other relationship with me as the other partner in the practice or division or department or anybody else in our department. Me as the employer, I'm going to say those patients are mine. And the only opportunity you got to see those patients was because you were employed by me. So I'm going to say you can't solicit any of my patients. You're not going to take any of the information for any of my patients and contact them for some period of time. I also might have a non-interference clause. Depending upon your specialty, I might say you're not going to interfere in our surgery center relationship, or you're not going to interfere with the nursing home that we make rounds at, or you're not going to interfere with the contractual relationship we have with the vendor about. Again, for some of you, these post-employment restrictions are going to be very, very important. For others, it's going to be far lower down on your priority list. I need your help in terms of understanding what's most important for you so we can navigate for you most appropriately what you need to do in your contract. So think about these big picture issues. There's other nuances as well that we can certainly get into if we had more time in terms of what you need to entail, but each of these are the critical elements of your contract. Understand what the benefits mean. You know, if an employer is giving you individual health insurance and a claims-based policy that doesn't pay for a tail, compare that with an employer who's giving you family health insurance, a 401k or a 403b, paying for moving expenses, a signing bonus, student loan repayment, short and long-term disability, and providing an occurrence professional liability policy. Suddenly that job that's giving you less money but giving you all those extra benefits, that's really an attractive opportunity because of all those non-cash benefits that you're getting in terms of how it's being provided. Or the calls Q2 versus Q7, as I said before, that can make a big difference for you in terms of the quality of life. And all of these pieces in the contract really need to fit together in terms of what you're looking to do. I've seen some contracts for employers that are short as 2 or 3 pages. Others could be 30 pages. Bigger is not better. Shorter is not better than worse. We need to understand all the pieces fit together. Sometimes the challenge is, geez, it's only a 3-page contract, but it's all the things that they didn't address that I need to make sure are applied. And sometimes it could be the 30-page contract and they have inconsistencies within the contract and still other issues they don't need to address that we need to make sure are clear and clarity in terms of your short-term opportunities, your long-term progression in terms of the things that you can look to get to. My hope is, and again, we only have a limited time tonight to talk about things. We can certainly do a longer lecture and cater to your specific program. If you'd like, you can just shoot me an email and I'm happy to do that and make it a longer presentation for you and go into some of the more nuanced details because we have so many different specialties on the phone. I couldn't make it really specialty specific, but I can certainly do that if you'd like. But my hope is once we get through COVID, and we will get through it hopefully sooner rather than later once the vaccine rollout really occurs, it's going to be a challenge for you to interview during this time. There's no doubt. You may not have the opportunity to go visit the place you're looking to work in person, or you may not be able to physically interact with all the people you want to interact with because of the social distancing restrictions. You might be doing a Zoom interview, 1 or 2 interviews with your colleagues, and obviously the things you can see in a Zoom interview are different than things you can see in person. You might not have the opportunity to bump into people in the hallway and ask them about what the job opportunity is, or talk to other attendings in that institution. Use the network that you've created, because your residency program and or your fellowship program and medical school, it's going to open up opportunities for you. To use another example from what was going on in the last political campaign, you all are less than the 1% of the population. There's very, very few people like you outside the confines of your training program. Use that to open doors for you. As much as I want all of you to get 3 or 4 or 5 different job opportunities, and I'm sure you have a ton of student loans you need to pay back, and you want to make as much money as you can and have a good quality of life, as hard as you want to work, you can only work 1 full-time job. So once you find that job that works the best for you and you've signed the contract, tell somebody else in your program who you're familiar with, hey, there's this other opportunity I had. It wasn't ideal for me. It may be something you want to think about, because I guarantee you 3 or 5 or 7 years from now, when you're looking for a new job, hopefully by your choice rather than by your employer's choice, and you send something out on Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook, or whatever the latest technology is at the time, saying, I'm thinking about a new job. Anybody have any ideas that they could help me with in terms of what I need to do? If you were the person who hoarded all 4 or 5 of those different opportunities, how inclined is somebody want to help you? And the irony of it is, some of the people who are in your program now, they might be working with you 5 years from now. They might be working for you 5 years from now, or you might be working for them 5 years from now, depending upon how life changes. People are going to meet at conferences. I can't tell you how many times when I help out a client, I ask them, how did you hear about this job? Oh, it's somebody I knew from my training program. It's somebody who one of my attendings introduced me to. It's somebody I met at a conference. Very, very small fraternity / sorority you're in. Use it to take advantage and open opportunities for yourself in terms of what you want to do. So the goal is, once you get through this interview process, once you find the job, once you sign the contract, we right side the world up for you. In spite of all the craziness going on right now, and you can be in a good, stable setting where you can get yourself situated, hopefully have opportunities for advancement that are defined and clear, with clear parameters and clear goals that you need. And if it doesn't work out, you can have a smooth separation in terms of what you're looking to do. A couple of things I want you to think about in terms of when you're thinking about that next job. Don't rely on a handshake. It's even harder now in the Zoom world, obviously, rely on a handshake. You're going to be interviewing. At some point, they're going to say, we'd love to hire you, Bruce. Say, great. That's real. I'm really, really excited about that opportunity. How soon can I get my contract? And they say, oh, here's the contract. We'll email it to you right now while we're on this Zoom call. Same contract everybody else signs, just sign right here. Again, put your dating hat on. I know it sounds silly. And I wrote an article, actually, that I'll give you a link for it. Or I went, I think it was to Match.com, and looked up their top 10 dating tips, and in real life, not in the medical world, real life dating tips. And I use that to analogize for the things you all need to think about when you're out for your job search process, because it's helpful. You're out on that date, you're on that first date. You want to see if there's good chemistry. You want to see if there's synchronicity in terms of their goals, my goals, where we see each other going in terms of advancement of the career. So the prospective employer says, Bruce, I'm ready to hire you. I'll give you the contract. Just sign it right now. Email it back to me. We'll be off to the races. Think about the dating game. For those of you who are married, how many of you got married on the first or second date? You may have done it. If it happened in Vegas, you might have lesser odds than in other places, but this is a really important decision for you. It's the first time in your career where somebody's not going to say, congratulations, you've matched, I'll see you in July. This is a little bit of a chance for give and take in terms of what you need to do. Understand the timing of the process. You get a job offer in January or February, you're likely going to have more flexibility than in May or June of your last year in terms of supply and demand, how much of a quote unquote poker player you think you are in terms of what you'd like to do or how you'd like to do it, and where you see flexibility in terms of how the job is. So say, great employer, I'm really, really excited. Thank you so much. Let me take this contract, read it through. You may have remembered meeting my significant other, my partner. I'll get back to you in a timely way. Now, if I'm the employer, it's a pain in the neck for me to interview. I lose productivity time doing it all the time. I'd much rather say, I've identified my candidate, get that candidate to sign the contract, then move on so I can focus on being a clinician, because I don't like being a business person, even as the employer. I want to focus on healing people and helping people. So I might say, Bruce, I'm going to give you the contract offer. If I don't hear back to you within a month, I'm going to rescind the offer because there's other great people that I've interviewed. I'd really like you to come join my institution or join my private practice, but I need to run my business accordingly. So I'm going to give you a month. If I don't hear back from you, I'm going to rescind the offer. So as soon as you read the contract, let's just use hypothetical. You've interviewed 3 different places: job A, job B, job C. Job A just gave you the offer, told you you have 4 weeks to turn it around. Job B you've interviewed with, thought it went great, haven't heard a word from them. Crickets. Job C you've interviewed with, they gave you a contract right away, but no pressure on you whatsoever, to the point where you almost think that they forgot about you, but they put no pressure on you in terms of what you need. As soon as you get that job contract from A, read it over, see what makes the most sense. Then call job B. Hey, job B, I really enjoyed meeting with you. I just want to see where you are on the hiring process. I'm flattered. I recently received another opportunity. They're giving me 2 weeks to turn it around. Not the 4 weeks that I was told. They're giving me 2 weeks. I wanted to see where you were in the hiring process. Shake the tree a little bit. See where their supply and demand is. See what their timing is. If they're really interested in hiring you, they will move mountains, hopefully, to get you that contract offer sooner than they otherwise would. Hey, job C, really enjoyed meeting you. Thank you so much for the offer. I appreciate you not putting any pressure on me. This is a really stressful time for me. I've recently received another offer. That other offer is offering me 1, 2, and 3. I recognize you may not be able to give me all of 1, 2, and 3, certainly not in the first year. But if you can give me 1 in the first year, give me 2 and 3 in the second year, and give me 4 and 5 and maybe 6 in year 3, all other things being equal, I'd really like to work for you. Again, don't be afraid to ask for changes. Understand where there's flexibility. It's okay to be a little piggish. It's not okay to be a hog in terms of what you're looking for. I want to make sure that you're in the best situation, that you understand what your goals and priorities are, how they synchronize with what your expectations are, that you have as many short-term protections as you need to have so you're protecting the best way you can. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It can be an intimidating process. Some of you might want to play poker and wait to the 11th hour to sign a contract. Some of you might want to sign the first offer you get just so you can have comfort, peace of mind, sleep well at night, and understand where your career is going. You know who you are better than I know who you are, but understand what makes the most sense. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's a sign of strength if you think, I want to get this opportunity. This is the place I want to be. I know that the place I'm joining, private practice or academics or community hospital, they certainly had to use a lawyer to put something together at some point. It's okay if I want to have a professional advisor help me as well. What I always tell clients is my job is to get you signed in that job. My job is not to burn down the house to get you that opportunity, because I want you to last there for the long haul. And things that we need to clarify or address or tweak or modify are things that frankly are going to protect the employer and protect you in terms of making sure you're getting squared away. So don't be afraid to ask for help. It's your career. And once you get set up in that first contract, it's going to set you up for subsequent contracts in terms of what you want to do. It's so important because you've worked so hard to make sure you're getting appropriately protected. And this first opportunity is the best thing you can think of. I often have clients who the first job doesn't work out nearly the way they want. The employer didn't fulfill their expectations. The practice didn't grow they wanted to do. I've had some clients who have been negatively impacted by COVID, and their productivity expectations were significantly diminished because of the place they were practicing. I want you to get it started off on the best foot. The world is upside down right now. There's no denying it, but we can still give you the proper assurances and make sure that you're protected from as many of the unexpected things as we can to make sure it's the right opportunity for you. And getting your contract squared away is the first building block in terms of understanding how that's going to work for you. A couple of other healthcare resources, again, because the limited time we have today. If you go to my firm's webpage, you can go under my name. There's a ton of different articles that I've written. I write regularly for different publications about healthcare legal issues. I purposely don't quote Supreme Court justices. I'm guessing you all don't want to read articles quoting Supreme Court justices. So you can go to that. You can see some of the different articles that I've written. I've written articles, I told you about the dating game. If you're a baseball fan, there's an article where I analogize where you should be in your last year of training vis-a-vis the Major League Baseball season. If you're a fan of music, I wrote an article where I use song titles to illustrate term and termination provisions. I just wrote an article that recently came out talking about non-compete clauses and how they work in contracts, and I use TV shows to illustrate that. and I couldn't resist. I had to use that TV show that some of you may be familiar with, more so today probably than any other day, that show called The Apprentice, where our current president was the host of that show, and used that to illustrate some of the non-compete provisions you need to think about. So there's a bunch of articles in there. I regularly write for publications, and happy to share those things about non-competes, about HIPAA settlement arrangements, about salary information, as well as just business of medicine articles you need to be aware of. And we will stop there in terms of where we're at. I want to just go back briefly at the very beginning. Jay, again, is a great co-host with me in these opportunities. And here's Jay's information again about the different services that he can provide for you to the extent you're shopping for disability insurance, you need help with home ownership type activities, all the different financial services activities. Those are the things that you should think about. So we will stop here, unfortunately, because the number of people on the call today, I can't take questions via chat room. But I am happy if you have questions to feel free to shoot me an email and get you squared away. And good luck as you go through this process. And we will talk soon, and have a great day.